The Green family's house had stood at the end of Hawthorne Lane for almost a century. Its white painted boards were weathered, its shutters warped by time, its roof groaning with age whenever the wind blew. To neighbors, it was just another relic of a small New England town. But to Emily Green, it was home. On Friday evening, her parents were in a rush. Suitcases rolled across the wooden floors, car keys jingled, the air alive with hurried voices. They were leaving for a weekend conference in Boston, and Emily, 19 years old and convinced she was mature enough, insisted she could stay alone. Her mother fussed over her as she packed the trunk of the car. "Are you sure you'll be all right, Em? You know how this house creaks in the wind. And if there's another storm." "I'll be fine, Mom," Emily said with a small laugh. "It's just 2 nights. I'll keep the doors locked. Besides, I kind of like the quiet." Her father gave her a kiss on the forehead. "If anything feels off, call us. Or call the neighbors. We'll be back Sunday evening." Emily watched the car roll down the gravel driveway, taillights fading into the dusky sky. The cicadas had already begun their nightly chorus. The house loomed behind her, its windows catching the last light of the sun, blank and watchful. She stepped back inside, shutting the heavy oak door. Silence filled the rooms immediately, thick and unfamiliar. Though she had grown up here, the house always seemed to change when she was alone. She made herself dinner macaroni and cheese, quick and easy, and ate in front of the television. The clock ticked steadily in the hallway, each second echoing louder as the evening deepened. By the time the dishes were done and the news was over, the house felt too quiet. Emily paused in the living room, glancing toward the upstairs landing. At the far end of the hall, just visible from where she stood, was a door. Dark wood. Heavy. Always locked. Her parents had never told her what was behind it. Storage, they had said. Just old junk. But something in the way they avoided the topic, the way her father quickly changed the subject whenever she asked, had carved a permanent question into her mind. Now, with the house empty and silent, the door seemed louder than anything. Emily shivered and turned away. She had a whole weekend ahead of her. It was only the first night. The wind picked up around midnight, rustling the trees and rattling the shutters. Emily curled beneath a blanket on the couch, her phone glowing in her hand. She scrolled aimlessly, trying to ignore the groans of the old house. Then she heard it. Faint, deliberate. A creak on the stairs. Her head snapped up. The air seemed to hold its breath. Slowly, she set her phone aside and listened. Another creak. One step higher. She told herself it was the house settling. Old wood shifting. Nothing more. But her body disagreed. Her skin prickled, her pulse quickened. Forcing a laugh, she said aloud, "Okay, seriously, I'm not gonna spook myself." She gathered her things and went upstairs, determined to show herself there was nothing wrong. The hallway stretched before her, dim under the single light bulb. Doors to bedrooms and closets lined either side. At the very end, the locked door stood in shadow. The air was cooler there. She walked slowly down the hall, her socked feet silent on the floorboards. Her eyes kept flicking to that door, as if expecting it to rattle or burst open. It didn't. It stood perfectly still. But as she turned into her bedroom, she thought she heard something. A whisper. Soft. Muffled. As though someone spoke from the other side of the locked door. Emily froze, hand on her doorknob. Her breath caught. She strained to listen, but the whisper faded into silence. She darted into her room, shut the door, and pressed her back against it. For several minutes, she stood there, heart pounding. Finally, she convinced herself she'd imagined it. She climbed into bed, pulling the blanket to her chin. Sleep came slowly, fitful, broken by the sounds of wind and wood. At some point near dawn, she woke with a start. The hallway light was off. And from the far end of the hall, 3 soft knocks echoed against the locked door. Emily barely slept the next day. She moved through the house in a haze, making coffee, pacing the kitchen, replaying the sound of those knocks over and over in her head. By afternoon, she convinced herself it had been a dream. Stress, imagination, a half-sleeping mind. The day was calm, the sky clear, the house filled with warm sunlight. Nothing could be wrong in daylight. She vacuumed, dusted, cleaned the counters. Normal tasks, grounding tasks. She even laughed at herself once or twice, shaking her head at her own nerves. But as evening approached, the air seemed to change. The light dimmed too quickly. Shadows stretched too long. The tick of the clock grew louder again, hollow and insistent. By the time she curled up on the couch with dinner, unease coiled in her stomach. Every creak made her flinch. Every gust of wind against the windows made her heart skip. And her eyes kept drifting upward. To the ceiling. To the hallway above. To the door at the very end. That night, she decided to prove once and for all there was nothing to fear. She climbed the stairs slowly, each step groaning beneath her weight. The hallway stretched before her, the locked door looming in shadow. Her pulse thundered in her ears. She stopped in front of it. The door was tall, its surface scarred with scratches, the brass handle dulled by time. She reached out, hesitated, then wrapped her fingers around the knob. It was ice cold. She tried turning it. It didn't budge. Of course it didn't. It was always locked. But as she leaned closer, pressing her ear against the wood, her breath froze. From the other side came the faintest sound. Breathing. Slow. Steady. In and out. Emily jerked back, stumbling against the wall. The door remained closed, silent, still. But she knew what she had heard. There was someone or something behind the locked door. Emily spent the rest of the evening trying to convince herself that she hadn't heard breathing. She blasted music from her phone, called a friend just to chat, and even left every light on in the house. But when the clock struck midnight, the house seemed to reclaim its silence. The laughter on the phone felt distant, thin, useless against the growing pressure in her chest. She sat on the edge of her bed, phone clutched in her hands, staring at the darkened hallway. The locked door was hidden from sight, but in her mind it loomed larger than the rest of the house. And then she heard it. A whisper. Faint at first, like wind slipping through cracks. Then clearer, carrying a rhythm that sent shivers down her spine. Her name. M.I. Lee. She gasped, dropping her phone onto the blanket. The sound came from the end of the hallway, behind the locked door. She clamped her hands over her ears, but the whisper wasn't in her ears, it was in her head. M.I. Lee. Open. She shook her head violently. No, no, I'm imagining this. I'm imagining. A loud thud against the locked door cut her words short. The floor trembled. Emily bolted from her bed, slamming her door shut, fumbling with the lock. She pressed her back against the wood, her chest heaving. Silence returned just as suddenly as the noise had come. For hours, She sat awake, knees pulled to her chest, waiting for another sound. The house remained still. But she didn't sleep. By morning, Emily was pale, her eyes shadowed from lack of rest. She couldn't stay in the house another day without answers. She went to the town library, determined to dig into the history of the greenhouse. The librarian, a thin woman with silver glasses, recognized her immediately. "You're a Green, aren't you? Your family still lives in the old place on Hawthorne Lane." Emily hesitated. "Yes. Do you know anything about the house?" The librarian gave a cautious smile. "It's been there a long time. Built in 1921. Some say it's peculiar." "Peculiar how?" The woman leaned closer. "People whisper about disappearances. Children, mostly. Back in the 1940s. The police searched, but nothing ever came of it. The house was empty for decades after." Emily's mouth went dry. "Disappearances." The librarian nodded. "Some neighbors swore they heard screams at night. Others claimed they saw figures in the windows when no one was supposed to be living there. Your grandparents bought it in the 70s. Brave souls." Emily's thoughts raced. Disappearances. Screams. Figures in the windows. "Do you have old newspapers?" she asked. Within an hour, she was hunched over yellowed pages in the archive room. Headlines leapt out at her. "Child vanishes on Hawthorne Lane. No trace found. Third disappearance in 2 months. Police suspect house is cursed." Each story was the same. A missing child, last seen near her family's property. No resolution. No bodies. Her stomach churned. She closed the folder with trembling hands. As she left the library, the wind picked up, sending leaves skittering across the sidewalk. She wrapped her arms around herself, shivering despite the sun. The locked door wasn't just a storage closet. She was sure of it now. That evening, Emily tried to prepare. She carried a flashlight, kept a kitchen knife within reach, and pushed a chair beneath her bedroom doorknob. She didn't know what she was preparing for, but she felt she had no choice. As night fell, the air in the house grew heavy again. The wind outside rattled the shutters. The clock ticked too loudly. She lay in bed, wide awake, staring at the ceiling. Then came the creak. A single step on the stairs. Her pulse quickened. Another creak. Then another. Slow, deliberate, approaching the hallway. Emily gripped the flashlight, her knuckles white. She aimed it toward her door, heart hammering. A shadow passed under the crack of light at the bottom. And then, knock. Not at her door. At the locked door down the hall. One knock. 2. 3. Her breath caught. She thought she heard the faintest murmur again, her name curling like smoke in the air. Eily. The flashlight flickered in her hands. And from behind the locked door came a sound she would never forget. The slow, unmistakable turn of a key in a lock. Emily froze as the metallic clink echoed down the hall. She knew the locked door had no keyhole on this side. Her parents had always said it didn't open at all. Yet she had heard it. The slow rotation of metal, like a lock being undone. She staggered out of bed, flashlight trembling in her grip. The beam shook across the walls, landing on the door. The brass handle quivered, rattling in place, as though someone were gripping it from the other side. "Don't go near it," her mind screamed. But her legs moved anyway, each step dragging her closer. The whispers intensified. Not just her name now. Other voices overlapped, hushed and frantic. "Children. Men, women, all tangled together, calling, pleading, open, let us out. Her knees buckled. She pressed her back to the wall, sliding down until she was crouched on the floor. Then, bang! The entire door shuddered in its frame. Bang! Bang! Dust drifted from the ceiling. The handle twisted violently back and forth, as though something was pounding, fighting to escape. Emily screamed, stumbling backward until she hit her bedroom door. She scrambled inside, slammed it shut, wedged the chair back beneath the knob. The pounding continued down the hall, shaking the house. The whispers rose to shrieks. She clutched the flashlight against her chest, rocking back and forth, whispering to herself. Please stop. Please stop. Please stop. Hours passed. Sometime before dawn, the noise faded. The last sound was a soft click, like a lock turning back into place. Silence returned. But Emily knew it wasn't over. The next morning, Emily searched the house for courage or perhaps for proof she wasn't losing her mind. In the kitchen, she noticed something new. Scratches. Thin, jagged claw marks raked across the floorboards, leading from the locked door down the hallway. They hadn't been there yesterday. Her stomach lurched. She backed away, hands trembling. She couldn't stay ignorant any longer. If she was going to survive this house, she had to know what was behind that door. That night, armed with her flashlight and the kitchen knife, Emily stood before it. The brass handle gleamed dully under the beam. The air smelled faintly of rot, like damp earth and something far worse. She whispered to herself, "It's just a room. Just a room." Her fingers hovered over the handle. Then she heard it. A child's sob. It was faint, muffled, but unmistakable. "Help me," the voice whimpered. Her heart cracked. Against every instinct screaming at her to run, she twisted the handle. To her shock, it turned freely. The door groaned open. The smell hit her first. Damp, mold, and iron. She raised the flashlight. The beam cut through thick darkness, illuminating a narrow staircase leading down. The crying grew louder. She descended, each step creaking under her weight. The walls closed in around her, slick with moisture. At the bottom was a small stone chamber, lit only by her trembling light. And there, huddled in the corner, was a boy no older than 7. His skin was pale, his clothes tattered, his eyes wide and glassy. "Please," he whispered. Emily's throat closed. She stepped forward then froze. The boy's face twisted. His mouth stretched impossibly wide, splitting his cheeks. His eyes darkened to black pits. He lunged. Emily screamed, stumbling backward, slashing the knife wildly. The blade cut nothing but air. The boy dissolved into smoke, curling around her like cold fingers. The whispers erupted all at once. Dozens of voices, screaming, wailing, laughing. The chamber walls writhed, shadows crawling like insects. On the far wall, she saw them. Shapes pressed into the stone, hands, faces, mouths all straining to break through. The locked door hadn't been keeping people out. It had been keeping them in. Emily bolted up the stairs, her flashlight clattering against the walls. She slammed the door shut and threw her weight against it. The voices howled, furious, clawing at the wood. The floor shook as though the whole house were alive, breathing with rage. She ran, stumbling through the hallway, down the stairs, toward the front door. She grabbed the knob. Locked. She hadn't locked it. Frantic, she fumbled with the deadbolt, but it wouldn't turn. The metal was ice cold, biting her skin. Behind her, footsteps thundered up from the basement. She didn't look back. She darted into the living room, clutching her knife. Shadows writhed on the walls, stretching long fingers toward her. She slashed at them, her blade cutting only air. The whispers became voices, loud and commanding now. Stay with us. You opened the door. The chandelier above rattled violently before crashing to the floor, shards of glass exploding across the carpet. Emily ran to the window, yanked at the curtains, and tried to shove it open. It wouldn't budge. Her reflection stared back at her, pale and wild-eyed. But then the reflection smiled. Her own face grinned back, mouth curling unnaturally wide, eyes glimmering black. She staggered away with a sob. Why me? She screamed into the empty air. The answer came at once, whispered from 100 mouths. Because you are alone. Emily collapsed to her knees, sobbing. The house trembled around her, walls groaning, doors slamming. She knew there was no escape. From the hallway, the basement door creaked open. Cold air rushed in, carrying with it the sound of chains dragging across stone. Something was coming. She scrambled to her feet, clutching the knife like a lifeline. Stay away, she shrieked. A shape emerged from the darkness. Taller than any human, its limbs too long, its head brushing the ceiling. Its body shifted like smoke, yet its hands were solid, skeletal, with claws that scraped the floor. It stopped inches from her. Its face was a void, featureless, yet she felt its gaze burning into her. It lowered its head, and from the emptiness came a single whisper. Yours now. The knife slipped from her hands. Her body stiffened, as though strings had been tied to her limbs. She tried to scream, but no sound came out. The shadows surged, wrapping around her, pulling her into the darkness. For a heartbeat, the house went silent. Then, nothing. The next morning, the greenhouse stood quiet, sun shining gently on its windows. To any passerby, it looked empty, ordinary. But if one stood close, pressing an ear against the door, they might hear it. A faint whisper. A girl's voice, calling from behind the locked door. Help me.